Stop moving. Stop explaining. Stop reacting. The world has lied to you. You were taught that effort wins, that noise creates power, that action proves worth. But the people who actually dominate life do less. They wait while others panic. They stay silent while others overshare. They remain still while others exhaust themselves. This audiobook will show you why doing nothing at the right moment is the most aggressive move you can make. If you learn when not to move, you cannot be beaten. You have a choice. Every moment gives you one. React or control. Most people think power comes from speed, from firing back, from saying something immediately, from doing something, anything, to relieve the pressure inside their chest. That instinct is exactly why they lose. Reaction is not strength. Reaction is emotional surrender. Reaction is handing the steering wheel to whatever provoked you. Control is different. Control is strategic patience repeated daily. Control is choosing when to move, not moving because you were pushed. That's the key. When someone insults you and you fire back, you didn't defend yourself, you revealed yourself. When someone pressures you and you rush a decision, you didn't act, you panicked. When something doesn't go your way and you explode emotionally, you didn't stand up, you folded. Stillness is not weakness. Stillness is command. You don't need their permission to pause. You don't need their permission to think. You don't need their permission to not react. Most people live as if the world controls their nervous system. A comment controls their mood. A delay controls their patience. A look controls their confidence. You have a choice. If someone can trigger you, they can steer you. If someone can rush you, they can use you. If someone can bait you into reacting, they already won. That's the harsh truth most people avoid. It's not about anger, it's about discipline. It's not about emotions existing, it's about who's in charge of them. Stillness is not weakness. Stillness is command. Look around. In meetings, the one who talks the most is rarely the one with the most power. In arguments, the first person to lose composure loses leverage. In life, the person who reacts the least sees the most. Control begins with delay. A pause before you speak, a breath before you decide, a moment of silence before you respond. That pause is not empty, it's loaded. It's where clarity enters. You have a choice. When provoked, do nothing at first. Let the emotion rise. Let it pass. Watch it like weather instead of obeying it like a command. Most people don't lose because they're incapable. They lose because they react too fast. They answer questions they didn't need to answer. They fight battles they didn't need to fight. They move before the picture is clear. That's not courage. That's compulsion. Stillness is not weakness. Stillness is command. Here's the discipline you must build. When something triggers you, count to 10 internally. Not dramatically, not performatively, silently. Ask yourself one question. Does reacting give me leverage or take it away? That's the key. If reacting relieves emotion but weakens position, don't do it. If silence feels uncomfortable but increases control, choose silence. You don't need their permission to slow down. You don't need their permission to be unreadable. You don't need their permission to be calm. Calm is threatening in a reactive world because calm cannot be manipulated. People who react are predictable. Predictable people are easy to control. When you stop reacting, people notice, not immediately, but inevitably. They speak louder, they explain more, they reveal intentions, and you watch. Stillness is not weakness. Stillness is command. This is where real confidence comes from. Not bravado, not aggression, but certainty. Certainty doesn't rush. Certainty doesn't flinch. Certainty doesn't need to prove itself. You have a choice. Next time someone disrespects you, pause. Next time something goes wrong, pause. Next time pressure mounts, pause. That pause is power. You'll feel the urge to react. That urge is old conditioning. That urge is ego demanding relief. Let it pass. It's not about suppressing emotion. It's about not letting emotion drive. Stillness is not weakness. Stillness is command. Understand this. The person who can wait controls the tempo. The person who controls the tempo controls the outcome. In negotiations, the calm one wins. In conflict, the composed one wins. In life, the disciplined one wins. You don't need to win every exchange. You need to win positioning. That's the key. When you react, you play their game. When you pause, you change the rules. You have a choice. Control your breathing when you feel rushed. Control your voice when you feel challenged. Control your body when you feel emotional. These are not small things. These are foundational skills. Stillness is not weakness. Stillness is command. And once you master this, once you stop reacting and start controlling, you'll see something clearly. Most of the world is running, talking, explaining, proving. They mistake motion for power. You won't. You've learned to pause. You've learned to hold. You've learned to choose. You mastered reaction. Now you're ready to understand why so many people stay busy but powerless. Now let's expose the illusion that keeps them trapped. You have a choice. Move because you are certain, or move because you are afraid. Most people never learn the difference. They think activity equals progress. They think motion equals momentum. They think if they keep moving, no one will notice they are unsure. But constant movement hides uncertainty, not confidence. That's the truth. Look closely at the world around you. The busiest people are often the most lost. The loudest plans usually mask the weakest direction. The fastest talkers are often running from silence. If you were certain, you wouldn't rush. That's the key. Confidence doesn't scramble. Confidence doesn't fill every gap with noise. Confidence doesn't need to prove itself with exhaustion. Certainty is calm. Certainty is deliberate. Certainty moves only when the direction is clear. You have a choice. When you feel the urge to stay busy, ask yourself why. Are you acting from clarity or escaping doubt? Most people don't act because they know what they're doing. They act because stopping would force them to face what they don't know. Stillness exposes confusion. Motion hides it. That's why people overwork, overtalk, overcommit. Busyness replaces clarity. Noise replaces direction. And society rewards this illusion. They praise hustle without asking where it's going. They applaud effort without demanding results. But effort without direction is just wasted energy. It's not about productivity. It's about discipline. If you were certain, you wouldn't rush. You don't need their permission to slow down. You don't need their permission to pause a decision. You don't need their permission to say, I need more time. Rushing is not a virtue. Rushing is fear in motion. Fear of missing out, fear of falling behind, fear of being seen as inactive. But here's what no one tells you. The person who controls pace controls outcome. Fast decisions feel powerful. Slow decisions are powerful. That's the key. When you rush, you react. When you slow down, you choose. You have a choice. Think about the last time you felt overwhelmed. Notice what happened. You probably sped up. You added tasks. You filled your calendar. Not because it helped, but because it distracted. Motion numbs uncertainty. Silence forces clarity. That's why silence scares people. In silence, excuses disappear. In silence, direction must be chosen. If you were certain, you wouldn't rush. Look at real power. Strategic leaders don't hurry. Elite operators don't scramble. The most dangerous people move slowly until they don't. They wait, they watch, they decide once. It's not about laziness, it's about precision. You don't need their permission to do less. You don't need their permission to cut distractions. You don't need their permission to move only when it matters. Here's a discipline you must build.
Before you act, ask, am I moving towards something or away from discomfort? That's the key. If the answer is discomfort, stop. Sit with it. Let it sharpen you instead of drive you. Fear always demands motion. Confidence allows restraint. If you were certain, you wouldn't rush. Watch people under pressure. They multitask, they over-explain, they chase every signal. That's not efficiency. That's panic wearing a uniform. Busyness feels productive, but clarity produces results. You have a choice. Reduce unnecessary movement. Reduce unnecessary conversation. Reduce unnecessary decisions. Not everything needs action. Some things need space. Space to observe, space to think, space to see what others miss because they're moving too fast. That's the key. When you slow down, patterns emerge. When you slow down, motives become clear. When you slow down, you stop wasting energy. Stillness isn't stagnation. Stillness is filtration. It separates impulse from intention. If you were certain, you wouldn't rush. Here's what to do starting today. When you feel pressured to act immediately, delay by default. When you feel busy but unclear, stop one task. When you feel the urge to add, remove instead. This is discipline. This is control. It's not about doing nothing forever. It's about doing the right thing once. The world will try to rush you. Deadlines, expectations, opinions. Let them rush. You don't need their permission to move at your pace. People who rush are easy to manipulate. People who pause are hard to read. Unreadable is powerful. That's the key. When you stop confusing motion with progress, everything changes. Your energy returns. Your decisions sharpen. Your confidence stabilizes. Because confidence isn't loud. It isn't busy. It isn't frantic. Confidence is quiet certainty. If you were certain, you wouldn't rush. You've learned to stop reacting. Now you're learning to stop hiding fear behind movement. Stillness gave you control. Slowness gives you clarity. And once you have clarity, there's one discipline that multiplies all of it. Silence. You slowed your body. Next, you slow your mouth. Now, let's talk about the weapon most people can't hold.
You have a choice. Speak to relieve pressure, or stay silent and transfer it. Most people don't know this. They feel tension and rush to talk. They feel discomfort and rush to explain. They feel judged and rush to defend. That rush costs them leverage. Talking relieves pressure. Silence transfers pressure. That's the key. When you speak too soon, you release your tension onto yourself. When you stay silent, the tension moves outward. It lands on the other person. And most people can't handle that. Silence forces others to reveal themselves. Watch it happen. In conversations, in negotiations, in arguments. The first person to fill the silence usually loses position. Why? Because words expose intention. Words expose emotion. Words expose need. Silence hides all three. You don't need their permission to be quiet. You don't need their permission to pause. You don't need their permission to let a moment stretch. Most people talk because silence scares them. Silence feels like vulnerability to the undisciplined mind. But silence isn't emptiness. Silence is pressure. That's the key. When you don't speak, the other person starts to. They explain, they justify, they overcorrect. They reveal motives you didn't have to ask for. Silence forces others to reveal themselves. Think about arguments. The moment you start explaining yourself, you've already conceded ground. You're now reacting to their frame instead of holding your own. It's not about being rude, it's about being disciplined. It's not about dominance, it's about control. You have a choice. Next time someone challenges you, don't answer immediately. Let the silence sit. Let it breathe. You'll feel the urge to speak. That urge is weakness trying to escape discomfort. Resist it. Talking relieves pressure. Silence transfers pressure. That's the key. Look at powerful people. They don't rush to respond. They don't over-explain. They don't fill space unnecessarily. They speak when they decide to, not when they're pushed to. Silence gives you time. Time to observe tone, time to read body language, time to see what's really being said beneath the words. You don't need their permission to listen instead of speak. Here's what the weak do. They talk to be liked. They talk to be understood. They talk to be safe. Here's what the strong do. They listen. They wait. They choose. Silence forces others to reveal themselves. In negotiations, silence makes the other side blink. In conflict, silence exposes insecurity. In leadership, silence commands attention. Because silence suggests certainty. If you were unsure, you'd be talking. That's the key. It's not about muteness, it's about timing. Say less, mean more. When you speak, make it deliberate, make it final, make it necessary. Everything else is noise. You have a choice. You can answer every message instantly, or you can respond when it serves you. You can explain every decision, or you can let results speak. You can defend yourself, or you can let silence signal confidence. You don't need their permission to be unreadable. Unreadable people are dangerous because they can't be predicted, they can't be rushed, they can't be baited. Silence forces others to reveal themselves. Here's a discipline to practice. When asked a question, pause for 3 seconds before answering. Not dramatically, not theatrically, internally. Those seconds do 3 things. They calm your nervous system. They slow the conversation. They shift power back to you. That's the key. When someone pressures you for an answer, say less than expected. A short sentence, a neutral tone, no justification. Talking relieves pressure. Silence transfers pressure. Most people talk themselves into weak positions. They negotiate against themselves. They volunteer information. They overcommit. All because silence feels uncomfortable. But discomfort is not danger. Silence is only dangerous to ego. It's not about arrogance. It's about discipline. It's not about manipulation. It's about awareness. Silence forces others to reveal themselves. Watch how people react when you stop filling space. They get nervous. They start rambling. They show their hand. And you learn. You see who needs approval, who fears judgment, who lacks certainty. Silence shows you hierarchy without anyone saying a word. That's the key. In leadership, silence creates gravity. People lean in, they pay attention, they wait. In relationships, silence filters intention. Those who respect you remain. Those who seek control push harder. Information you can use. You have a choice. Speak to feel better, or stay silent to be stronger. Speak to relieve pressure, or stay silent and let others carry it. You don't need their permission to hold the line. Here's the truth. Most people fear silence because it exposes them, their insecurity, their need to be validated, their fear of being insignificant. When you master silence, you rise above that. You stop performing, you stop chasing approval, you stop reacting. Silence forces others to reveal themselves. And once you see clearly, you gain something even more powerful than silence: composure. You've learned to stop reacting. You've learned to stop hiding fear behind motion. Now you've learned to stop leaking power through words. Next, you'll learn how this silence turns into visible authority. You've mastered restraint. Now let's talk about presence.
You have a choice. Carry your emotions into the room or command the room by mastering them. Most people think leadership is volume. They think authority is force. They think presence comes from taking up space. They're wrong. Leaders are recognized by composure, not volume. That's the key. The calm man doesn't compete for attention, he attracts it. He doesn't raise his voice, he lowers the temperature. Emotional restraint dominates emotional chaos. Look closely at any room under pressure. A meeting, a crisis, a confrontation. Everyone is reacting, talking over each other, defending positions, leaking emotion. And then there's one person who isn't. They're calm, still, watching. The room orbits them. Whoever controls emotion controls outcome. That's the law. Emotion spreads, panic spreads, confidence spreads. The strongest emotional signal always wins. If you bring chaos, chaos multiplies. If you bring calm, calm takes over. You have a choice. When tension rises, don't match it, lower it. When voices get louder, get quieter. When emotions spike, stay steady. You don't need their permission to stay calm. Most people lose authority the moment they show emotional urgency, the moment they rush words, the moment they tighten their face, the moment they need to be understood. Need is weakness in public. Calm signals surplus. Whoever controls emotion controls outcome. That's the key. Think about the leaders you respect. They don't flinch. They don't scramble. They don't get dragged into emotional exchanges. They let others burn energy. They conserve theirs. Calm is not passivity. Calm is control under pressure. It's not about suppressing emotion. It's about regulating it. It's not about pretending not to feel. It's about choosing what others get to see. You have a choice. When someone challenges you publicly, breathe. Slow your body first. Relax your shoulders. Unclench your jaw. Your body leads your mind. That's the key. If your body is calm, your mind follows. If your body is tense, your mind panics. Control your physiology. You control the moment. Emotional restraint dominates emotional chaos. People test boundaries emotionally. They provoke, they pressure, they poke for a reaction. Not because they're strong, because they're unsure. They want to see if you'll crack. Don't give them the gift. You don't need their permission to remain unmoved. Here's the discipline. When emotions rise around you, say less. Move slower. Make eye contact longer. Those signals tell the room one thing: you're not threatened. Whoever controls emotion controls outcome. Watch what happens next. People begin to mirror you. Their voices soften, their words slow, their arguments weaken, because chaos needs fuel, and you're not providing it. That's the key. Calm people make others feel exposed, because emotional outbursts look small next to composure. That's why calm is intimidating. Not loud, not aggressive. Calm. You have a choice. Stop trying to dominate with force. Start dominating with presence. Presence comes from inner stillness, from emotional distance, from certainty. When you are calm, you see clearly. When you are calm, you hear what others miss. When you are calm, you choose instead of react. Emotional restraint dominates emotional chaos. Here's another rule. The first person to lose composure loses leverage. Always. In arguments, in negotiations, in leadership. Once emotion leaks, authority drains. That's the key. Train yourself to notice emotional spikes. Heat in the chest, tightness in the throat, urgency to speak. Those are signals. Pause when you feel them. You don't need their permission to pause. Let others emote. Let others escalate. Let others expose themselves. You stay centered. Whoever controls emotion controls outcome. This is not about being cold. It's about being grounded. People trust calm leaders. They feel safe around them. They follow them under pressure, because calm signals capability. If you can control yourself, you can control the situation. That's the unspoken message. You have a choice. Be another emotional participant or be the emotional anchor. Anchors don't move. Everything else does. That's the key. Practice this daily. In small moments, traffic, delays, disagreements. Don't rehearse arguments. Don't replay insults. Don't fuel inner chaos. Calm is a muscle. Use it. Every time you choose restraint, it grows stronger. Emotional restraint dominates emotional chaos. Soon, people will respond to you differently. They'll measure their words. They'll wait for your reaction. They'll seek your approval without asking. Not because you demanded it, because you earned it. You don't need their permission to command respect.
Respect follows control, and control starts inside. You've learned to stop reacting. You've learned to slow down. You've learned to stay silent. Now you've learned how calm turns into authority. But there's another layer: waiting. Because calm is powerful, but patience is deadly. You've controlled emotion. Now it's time to weaponize time itself.
You have a choice: rush because you feel pressure, or wait because you have power. Most people misunderstand waiting. They think waiting is weakness. They think waiting means hesitation. They think waiting means falling behind. They're wrong. Waiting is not passive. Waiting is predatory. That's the key. Strategic waiting exhausts impulsive opponents. While they burn energy, you conserve it. While they expose themselves, you study them. Force tries to break resistance. Time reveals cracks that force never could. I wait because I can. Understand this clearly. The one who can wait controls the field. The one who can't wait exposes urgency. Urgency is leverage handed to the other side. You have a choice. When you feel the urge to act immediately, ask why. Is it clarity or discomfort pushing you? Most people move not because it's time, but because the silence is unbearable. They mistake internal pressure for external necessity. That's the trap. Waiting requires discipline. Waiting requires emotional control. Waiting requires confidence in your position. It's not about laziness. It's about dominance. It's not about fear. It's about discipline. I wait because I can. Look at negotiations. The impatient side concedes first. They sweeten offers. They over-explain. They blink. The patient side says nothing. They let time do the work. That's the key. Time amplifies pressure. Silence magnifies uncertainty, and uncertainty breaks the impulsive. You don't need their permission to wait. You don't need their permission to say nothing. You don't need their permission to let things unfold. Most people panic when nothing happens. They think action is required. They think stillness means loss. But predators don't chase blindly. They stalk. They observe. They wait for the moment that guarantees success. I wait because I can. Here's what waiting does. It filters weak intent. People who aren't serious reveal themselves. People who are bluffing overplay their hand. People who are emotional make mistakes. And you gather information. That's the key. Waiting turns chaos into data. When you wait, you see patterns. You notice inconsistencies. You watch who cracks under pressure. Impulsive people defeat themselves. All you have to do is let them. You have a choice. Instead of reacting to provocation, delay. Instead of answering immediately, pause. Instead of forcing outcomes, allow them to mature. This is uncomfortable at first because ego wants resolution. Ego wants control now. But discipline wants leverage later. It's not about speed. It's about timing. I wait because I can. Waiting builds psychological pressure on them, not you. They start wondering. They start doubting. They start filling silence with assumptions. Most of those assumptions are wrong. That's how mistakes are born. You don't need their permission to let them make those mistakes. Here's a rule you must internalize. If nothing forces you to move, don't. That's the key. Urgency should come from strategy, not emotion. Deadlines should be chosen, not inherited. When someone pressures you, they reveal weakness. Pressure is often a confession. Why the rush? Why the push? Why the need for immediate action? Because they're uncomfortable waiting. Use that. I wait because I can. Think about conflicts. The person who escalates first loses control. The person who waits lets the other expose intent. Anger burns fast. Patience outlasts it. Time reveals cracks that force never could. You don't need to confront every issue immediately.
Some problems solve themselves. Some threats collapse under their own weight. Waiting lets reality work in your favor. That's the key. This doesn't mean never acting. It means acting once at the right moment. Waiting sharpens your strike. It concentrates force. Instead of 10 weak moves, you make one decisive one. You have a choice. Waste energy chasing control, or conserve energy and become control. Waiting is how you flip the dynamic. When others feel rushed, you feel grounded. When others feel anxious, you feel prepared. When others feel reactive, you feel strategic. I wait because I can. Here's how to practice this. Delay responses by default. Sleep on major decisions. Allow emotions, yours and theirs, to cool before acting. Notice how often problems look smaller after time passes. Notice how clarity improves. Notice how urgency fades. That's the key. Time is a filter. Only real issues survive it. Everything else disappears. You don't need their permission to trust time. Predatory patience isn't visible. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't threaten. It simply waits. And when the moment comes, it acts with certainty. Most people never see it coming because they mistook waiting for weakness. That's their mistake. I wait because I can. This is how you dominate without noise, without conflict, without force. You let the world move. You stay still. You choose the moment. You've learned to stop reacting. You've learned to slow down. You've learned to stay silent. You've learned to control emotion. Now you've learned how to let time work for you instead of against you. But waiting creates something else. Distance. And distance is what turns power into mystery. You've mastered patience. Now let's talk about the advantage of being misunderstood.
You have a choice. Rush because you feel pressure, or wait because you have power. Most people misunderstand waiting. They think waiting is weakness. They think waiting means hesitation. They think waiting means falling behind. They're wrong. Waiting is not passive. Waiting is predatory. That's the key. Strategic waiting exhausts impulsive opponents. While they burn energy, you conserve it. While they expose themselves, you study them. Force tries to break resistance. Time reveals cracks that force never could. I wait because I can. Understand this clearly. The one who can wait controls the field. The one who can't wait exposes urgency. Urgency is leverage handed to the other side. You have a choice. When you feel the urge to act immediately, ask why. Is it clarity or discomfort pushing you? Most people move not because it's time, but because the silence is unbearable. They mistake internal pressure for external necessity. That's the trap. Waiting requires discipline. Waiting requires emotional control. Waiting requires confidence in your position. It's not about laziness. It's about dominance. It's not about fear. It's about discipline. I wait because I can. Look at negotiations. The impatient side concedes first. They sweeten offers. They over-explain. They blink. The patient side says nothing. They let time do the work. That's the key. Time amplifies pressure. Silence magnifies uncertainty. And uncertainty breaks the impulsive. You don't need their permission to wait. You don't need their permission to say nothing. You don't need their permission to let things unfold. Most people panic when nothing happens. They think action is required. They think stillness means loss. But predators don't chase blindly. They stalk, they observe, they wait for the moment that guarantees success. I wait because I can. Here's what waiting does. It filters weak intent. People who aren't serious reveal themselves. People who are bluffing overplay their hand. People who are emotional make mistakes. And you gather information. That's the key. Waiting turns chaos into data. When you wait, you see patterns, you notice inconsistencies, you watch who cracks under pressure. Impulsive people defeat themselves. All you have to do is let them. You have a choice. Instead of reacting to provocation, delay. Instead of answering immediately, pause. Instead of forcing outcomes, allow them to mature. This is uncomfortable at first because ego wants resolution. Ego wants control now. But discipline wants leverage later. It's not about speed, it's about timing. I wait because I can. Waiting builds psychological pressure on them, not you. They start wondering, they start doubting, they start filling silence with assumptions. Most of those assumptions are wrong. That's how mistakes are born. You don't need their permission to let them make those mistakes. Here's a rule you must internalize. If nothing forces you to move, don't. That's the key. Urgency should come from strategy, not emotion. Deadlines should be chosen, not inherited. When someone pressures you, they reveal weakness. Pressure is often a confession. Why the rush? Why the push? Why the need for immediate action? Because they're uncomfortable waiting. Use that. I wait because I can. Think about conflicts. The person who escalates first loses control. The person who waits lets the other expose intent. Anger burns fast. Patience outlasts it. Time reveals cracks that force never could. You don't need to confront every issue immediately. Some problems solve themselves. Some threats collapse under their own weight. Waiting lets reality work in your favor. That's the key. This doesn't mean never acting. It means acting once at the right moment. Waiting sharpens your strike. It concentrates force. Instead of 10 weak moves, you make one decisive one. You have a choice. Waste energy chasing control, or conserve energy and become control. Waiting is how you flip the dynamic. When others feel rushed, you feel grounded. When others feel anxious, you feel prepared. When others feel reactive, you feel strategic. I wait because I can. Here's how to practice this. Delay responses by default. Sleep on major decisions. Allow emotions, yours and theirs, to cool before acting. Notice how often problems look smaller after time passes. Notice how clarity improves. Notice how urgency fades. That's the key. Time is a filter. Only real issues survive it. Everything else disappears. You don't need their permission to trust time. Predatory patience isn't visible. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't threaten. It simply waits. And when the moment comes, it acts with certainty. Most people never see it coming because they mistook waiting for weakness. That's their mistake. I wait because I can. This is how you dominate without noise, without conflict, without force. You let the world move. You stay still. You choose the moment. You've learned to stop reacting. You've learned to slow down. You've learned to stay silent. You've learned to control emotion. Now you've learned how to let time work for you instead of against you. But waiting creates something else. Distance. And distance is what turns power into mystery. You've mastered patience. Now let's talk about the advantage of being misunderstood.
You have a choice. Enter every conflict, or let time finish the fight for you. Most people rush into battles they didn't need to fight. They mistake provocation for necessity. They mistake ego wounds for real threats. That mistake drains them. Most conflicts resolve themselves when ignored. That's the truth. Ego burns energy faster than effort. People don't collapse because you attack them. They collapse because they can't sustain their own emotion. I didn't defeat them. I outlasted them. That's the key. Look at arguments online, workplace politics, personal grudges. They all follow the same pattern. One side escalates, the other side reacts, energy spirals.
nothing improves. But when one side refuses to engage, something strange happens. The aggressor keeps pushing, keeps talking, keeps exposing themselves. They reveal insecurity. They reveal obsession. They reveal lack of control. And eventually, they burn out. You don't need their permission to disengage. Disengagement is not surrender. It's strategic refusal. You have a choice. Feed the fire or starve it. Most conflicts need fuel, attention, reaction, validation. Remove those and the conflict dies. That's the key. Ego demands response. Ego wants to be seen. Ego wants to be acknowledged. When you deny it, ego panics. It pushes harder, gets louder, makes mistakes. Ego burns energy faster than effort. You don't have to do anything. I didn't defeat them. I outlasted them. Think about people who self-destruct. They post too much. They talk too much. They overreact. Not because they're strong, because they can't regulate themselves. Silence exposes that. When you refuse to react, they fight themselves. That's the key. Most people think ignoring is weak. They think silence means loss. But silence is pressure. Pressure reveals cracks. You have a choice. When attacked, pause. When criticized, wait. When provoked, do nothing. Doing nothing feels uncomfortable because ego wants to respond. Let it scream. You don't need their permission to let them unravel. Here's a discipline. Ask yourself, does this conflict threaten my future or my pride? That's the key. If it's pride, ignore it. Pride heals slower when fed. If it's real, act once decisively. Most conflicts are pride. People want reaction more than resolution. Starve them. I didn't defeat them. I outlasted them. Watch what happens when you stop engaging. They start narrating. They exaggerate. They contradict themselves. Observers notice. Credibility drains. You stay clean. They look unstable. That's power without effort. Ego burns energy faster than effort. Your job is to conserve. You don't need their permission to protect your energy. Here's another truth. Not every battle is meant to be won by action. Some are won by endurance. Time is the ultimate filter. Those without discipline can't last. That's the key. When you do nothing, you create contrast. Your calm highlights their chaos. Your restraint exposes their lack of it. People see who's in control. Silence makes instability obvious. You have a choice. Be remembered as reactive or be remembered as composed. Reputation is built more by what you don't do. I didn't defeat them. I outlasted them. Here's how to apply this. Stop responding to unnecessary messages. Stop correcting every lie. Stop defending yourself against noise. Truth doesn't need constant defense. It holds under time. Ego doesn't. Ego collapses. That's the key. When you withdraw attention, you withdraw oxygen. No oxygen, no fire. Some people will try harder to provoke you. That's confirmation. They need you. You don't need them. You don't need their permission to disengage. This is discipline. It's not about avoidance, it's about selection. Choose your battles like a professional, not like an emotional amateur. Professionals conserve energy. Amateurs waste it everywhere. Ego burns energy faster than effort. When you stop fighting everyone, you gain clarity. You focus on what matters. You build instead of react. And those who attacked, they're still fighting shadows. I didn't defeat them. I outlasted them. Eventually, people see the pattern. The loud one fades. The quiet one remains. Remaining is winning. You've learned to stop reacting. You've learned to wait. You've learned to stay silent. You've learned to let others misunderstand you. Now you've learned how doing nothing lets others collapse under their own weight. But there's an even sharper edge to this power, not responding at all. Because sometimes the most complete victory is absence. You outlasted conflict. Now you mastered disappearance.
You have a choice. Respond and feed something, or don't, and end it. Most people don't realize this. Every response feeds something: attention, emotion, conflict, expectation. Often the wrong thing. That's the key. When you respond automatically, you validate the trigger. You reward the behavior. You signal availability. And availability invites a pressure. Unanswered energy collapses on itself. No response is a complete sentence. Understand this deeply. Some messages are not meant to be answered. Some provocations are not meant to be acknowledged. Some questions are traps dressed as curiosity. You don't need their permission to ignore them. The modern world is addicted to response. Notifications, messages, mentions, demands. Everyone expects access to you instantly. That expectation is a lie. You have a choice. Respond because you feel obligated, or remain silent because you are disciplined. It's not about politeness, it's about control. It's not about being cold, it's about being intentional. No response is a complete sentence. When someone sends something designed to provoke, they want one thing: reaction. Reaction confirms relevance. Reaction proves impact. Reaction gives them power. Silence denies all three. That's the key. Unanswered energy has nowhere to go. It loops back. It intensifies. Then it collapses. People grow uncomfortable when ignored. They escalate. They over-explain. They reveal insecurity. You learn without saying a word. You don't need their permission to let them talk to themselves. Here's the discipline. Before responding, ask one question. What am I feeding if I reply? That's the key. If the answer is drama, don't reply. If the answer is ego, don't reply. If the answer is distraction, don't reply. Not everything deserves your energy. Energy is currency. Spend it like a professional. No response is a complete sentence. Most people respond out of habit. They don't choose, they react. Reaction makes you predictable. Predictable people are easy to manipulate. Silence breaks patterns. That's the key. Think about arguments that die when one side stops responding. Think about online fights that collapse when attention disappears. Think about people who fade when they're no longer acknowledged. That's not coincidence. That's psychology. Attention sustains behavior. Remove attention, behavior starves. Unanswered energy collapses on itself. You have a choice. Stop answering everything. Stop defending yourself everywhere. Stop correcting people who don't matter. You don't need their permission to be unavailable. Availability is not a virtue. Selectivity is. Silence is selective. No response is a complete sentence. Here's where people struggle. They fear silence will be misinterpreted. They fear being seen as weak. They fear missing out. But silence isn't weakness. Silence is boundaries enforced without words. Boundaries spoken are negotiable. Boundaries silent are final. That's the key. When you explain boundaries, people test them. When you enforce them silently, people adapt. No response teaches faster than any explanation. You don't need their permission to teach people how to treat you. Watch how behavior changes when you stop responding instantly. People become more respectful, more concise, more thoughtful, because access is no longer guaranteed. That's power. Unanswered energy collapses on itself. Here's a practical application. Delay all non-essential responses by default. Hours, days, sometimes forever. Notice which issues resolve themselves. Notice which people disappear. Notice which conversations weren't important to begin with. That's the key. Silence filters reality.
Important things persist. Noise fades. No response is a complete sentence. Some people will accuse you of ignoring them. That's information. They equate access with entitlement. You are not obligated to perform availability. You don't need their permission to protect your focus. This discipline will feel uncomfortable at first because you've been trained to respond, conditioned to react. Break the conditioning. Silence is not absence. Silence is presence withheld. And withholding presence creates leverage. That's the key. Think of silence as a mirror. People see themselves more clearly in it. Their impatience, their insecurity, their need. You remain untouched. Unanswered energy collapses on itself. Here's another truth. Responding feels productive, but restraint produces results. Most progress comes from what you don't engage with. You have a choice. Engage in every conversation or choose the ones that matter. Your life improves when you reduce unnecessary response. No response is a complete sentence. Silence sharpens your mind, reduces emotional clutter, restores focus. When you stop reacting externally, you regain control internally. That's the key. You've learned to let others self-destruct. Now you've learned to remove yourself entirely. Absence is powerful. But silence does more than create distance. It creates clarity. When you stop responding, you start seeing patterns, motives, truth. And once you see clearly, something changes inside you. Your instincts sharpen. You trust yourself more. You've mastered silence towards others. Now it's time to master silence within. You controlled reactions. You controlled motion. You controlled words. You controlled engagement. Now you refine perception.
You have a choice. Trust your instinct or drown it in noise. Most people say they overthink. They say their mind won't stop. They say they can't decide. That's not the problem. Overthinking comes from too much noise. That's the truth. Your mind isn't broken. It's overloaded. Stillness restores natural decision-making. That's the key. Instinct is not loud. Instinct is subtle. It doesn't shout. It whispers. And whispers can't be heard in chaos. When I'm quiet, I see everything. Most people never hear their instinct because they never shut up, internally or externally. They consume constantly. They talk constantly. They react constantly. And then they wonder why clarity never comes. You have a choice. Add more input or remove it. It's not about intelligence, it's about discipline. Your instinct is a survival system refined over thousands of years. It doesn't need improvement, it needs space. Stillness restores natural decision-making. That's the key. Think about moments when you knew something immediately. A gut feeling, a sense of danger, a clear yes or no. That didn't come from thinking harder, it came from listening. Noise kills listening. When I'm quiet, I see everything. Here's the mistake most people make. They think more information creates better decisions. Sometimes it does, often it doesn't. Too much information creates paralysis. You don't need more data. You need less interference. You don't need their permission to stop consuming. You don't need their permission to be offline. You don't need their permission to sit in silence. Silence is where instinct recalibrates. That's the key. Overthinking is not depth. Overthinking is confusion pretending to be intelligence. Your mind keeps spinning because it hasn't been given a clear signal to stop. Stillness is that signal. You have a choice.
When faced with a decision, you can research endlessly, or you can pause and feel. Not emotionally, physiologically. Your body knows before your mind explains. Tightness, ease, expansion, resistance. These are signals. But you won't notice them if you're constantly distracted. When I'm quiet, I see everything. Here's a discipline you must adopt. Create daily stillness. Not meditation for performance, not silence for productivity. Real stillness. No phone, no music, no input. Just you and your awareness. At first, it will be uncomfortable. Your mind will race. Old thoughts will surface. That's normal. You're detoxing from noise. That's the key. Don't fight the thoughts. Let them pass. Stillness is not control, it's allowance. Eventually, something shifts. The noise fades, the signal strengthens, and suddenly decisions feel obvious again. Stillness restores natural decision-making. You don't need their permission to trust yourself. Instinct isn't reckless, it's efficient. It doesn't debate endlessly, it recognizes patterns instantly. That's why overthinking feels exhausting. You're forcing what instinct already knows. You have a choice. Second-guess everything, or simplify until clarity returns. Complexity clouds judgment. Simplicity sharpens it. That's the key. Look at elite performers, athletes, operators, leaders under pressure. They don't think more in critical moments. They think less. They trained instinct through repetition and restraint. Stillness is training. When I'm quiet, I see everything. Here's another truth. Most bad decisions come from emotional noise, fear, urgency, external pressure. Stillness neutralizes emotion. When emotion settles, truth rises. That's the key. You don't need to analyze every option. You need to eliminate distractions until the right option stands out. That's how instinct works. It's subtraction, not addition. You have a choice. Fill every gap with noise, or let silence guide you. Stillness doesn't slow you down. It speeds up alignment. Once clarity arrives, action becomes clean, decisive, effective. Stillness restores natural decision-making. Practice this. When confused, stop. Don't ask more people. Don't search more opinions. Sit. Breathe. Let the nervous system settle. Then ask one question. What feels clean? Not exciting, not impressive. Clean. Your body will answer. When I'm quiet, I see everything. Here's how you rebuild trust with yourself. And when you trust yourself, something changes. You stop seeking validation. You stop outsourcing decisions. You stop hesitating. That's the key. Stillness reconnects you to internal authority. Authority doesn't come from knowing everything. It comes from knowing when you know enough. You don't need their permission to decide. Most people delay action because they don't trust their instincts. They drowned them out for years. You're reversing that. One quiet moment at a time. You've learned to stop reacting. You've learned to slow down. You've learned to stay silent. You've learned to wait. You've learned to disengage. You've learned to see clearly. Now your instinct is coming back online. And once instinct is sharp, action becomes rare but unstoppable. Because you no longer move out of impulse, you move out of inevitability. You've sharpened perception. Now it's time to sharpen execution. Stillness prepared you. Now comes the strike.
You have a choice. Move often or move decisively. Most people confuse activity with progress. They swing constantly. They adjust endlessly. They grind themselves down and still get nowhere. Rare action carries unstoppable force. That's the key. Power is not in how often you move. Power is in when you move. Precision beats persistence every time. Look at people who win quietly. They don't rush. They don't flail. They don't announce. They wait. They calculate. They strike once. I move once, I end it. That sentence terrifies impulsive people because it demands patience, because it demands certainty, because it demands restraint. Most people act to relieve anxiety, not to achieve outcome. That's the flaw. It's not about effort, it's about discipline. You have a choice. Act because you feel restless, or act because the moment is undeniable. Restlessness creates wasted motion. Inevitability creates results. That's the key. When action is inevitable, hesitation disappears, doubt disappears, second-guessing disappears. You don't decide anymore, you know. Stillness sharpened your instinct. Now instinct chooses timing. Rare action carries unstoppable force. Think about moments in your life when one move changed everything. A single decision, a single conversation, a single step away or forward. Those moments weren't rushed, they were ripe. Precision beats persistence every time. Most people exhaust themselves trying to force outcomes early. They push doors that aren't meant to open yet. They burn bridges that would have collapsed on their own. You don't need their permission to wait. You don't need their permission to do less. You don't need their permission to act only when it matters. Here's the discipline. Stop asking, "What can I do?" Start asking, "What must be done eventually?" That's the key. If the answer isn't clear, you wait. If the path isn't clean, you wait. If the timing isn't aligned, you wait. Waiting is not inaction, it's preparation. When the moment arrives, action feels effortless because it's aligned. I move once, I end it. That's not aggression, that's certainty. People who move constantly are unsure. People who move rarely are dangerous because when they move, they don't miss. Rare action carries unstoppable force. Here's another truth. Persistence is overrated. Precision is underrated. Persistence keeps you busy. Precision ends the problem. That's the key. Most people keep adjusting because they acted too early. They spend years fixing moves that never should have been made. You won't. You act once, cleanly. You have a choice. React to every opportunity or wait for the one that can't be ignored. Opportunities shout. Inevitability is quiet. Stillness trained you to hear it. You don't need their permission to say no to almost everything. Saying no creates space. Space creates clarity. Clarity reveals inevitability. Precision beats persistence every time. When you finally move, you won't explain. You won't justify. You won't hesitate. You'll execute. That's the key. Action taken too early requires maintenance. Action taken at the right time requires nothing. It stands. Think about confrontation. If you address issues too soon, they escalate. If you wait too long, they rot. But if you act when the moment is inevitable, one sentence ends it. I move once, I end it. That's power. Here's how to practice this. Reduce your actions drastically. If something doesn't demand action, remove it. If something can wait, let it. If something is unclear, pause. You don't need their permission to simplify your life. Less action, more impact. Rare action carries unstoppable force. You'll notice something shift. People stop testing you because you don't respond to noise. They stop pushing because when you act, it's final. Finality commands respect. That's the key. This chapter is about trust. Trust in timing, trust in instinct, trust in restraint. You're no longer trying to control everything. You're choosing the moments that matter.
Precision beats persistence every time. You've learned to wait. You've learned to be silent. You've learned to observe. You've learned to sharpen instinct. Now you've learned how to act. But there's a final refinement, because true power doesn't just move precisely, it remains unreadable. You act once, but before that, you disappear. You've mastered timing. Now you master invisibility.
You have a choice. Be visible and predictable, or be restrained and unreadable. Most people choose visibility. They explain themselves. They announce intentions. They broadcast emotions. And then they wonder why they're easy to manipulate. Controlled men appear dangerous because they are unreadable. That's the key. Power doesn't shout. Power withholds. Predictability is vulnerability. If people can read you, they can plan around you. If they can anticipate you, they can neutralize you. If they can trigger you, they can steer you. What they can't read, they can't defeat. Understand this. The world doesn't reward effort. It rewards restraint. It rewards those who don't show their hand, those who don't telegraph their next move, those who don't leak emotion. You have a choice. Show everything you feel, or control what you reveal. It's not about secrecy, it's about discipline. Most people mistake transparency for honesty. They overshare, they overreact, they overexplain, and in doing so, they give away leverage. That's the flaw. It's not about openness, it's about discipline. What they can't read, they can't defeat. Look at how people test boundaries. They push lightly at first. A comment, a look, a delay. They're watching for reaction. If you react, they learn. If you stay neutral, they hesitate. Hesitation creates respect. That's the key. When people can't predict you, they move carefully. When they move carefully, you control the pace. Predictability is vulnerability. Routine reactions, emotional patterns, verbal habits, all of these are tells. Strong people eliminate tells. You don't need their permission to be reserved. You don't need their permission to say less. You don't need their permission to stay composed. Restraint is not coldness. Restraint is selectivity. You choose what gets access to you. Controlled men appear dangerous because they are unreadable. Dangerous doesn't mean violent, it means uncertain. Uncertainty makes people cautious. That's the key. When others don't know what you'll do, they assume you can do more than you show. That assumption protects you. Predictability invites challenge. Unpredictability invites distance. Distance is power. You have a choice. React the same way every time, or disrupt expectations. Consistency in values is strength. Consistency in reactions is weakness. That's the change your response. Here's a discipline to build. Stop responding emotionally the same way twice. If someone expects anger, give calm. If they expect explanation, give silence. If they expect compliance, give delay. Not to manipulate, to protect your position. What they can't read, they can't defeat. This doesn't mean playing games, it means not being obvious. Obvious people are easy targets. Restraint creates ambiguity. Ambiguity creates leverage. That's the key. Think about negotiations. The side that reveals urgency loses. The side that stays neutral gains ground. Urgency is readable. Restraint is not. You have a choice. Show how much you care, or let people wonder. Wonder keeps people cautious. Caution keeps you safe. Predictability is vulnerability. Here's the truth. The world probes for weakness constantly. In business, in relationships, in conflict. Weakness is not emotion. Weakness is lack of control over emotion.
Controlled men appear dangerous because they don't leak information. They don't rush, they don't flinch, they don't explain, they observe. That's the key. When you restrain yourself, others project onto you. They imagine capability, they assume depth, they assign power. Let them. You don't need their permission to be underestimated or overestimated. Both are useful. Here's another discipline. Delay reactions intentionally. Let people sit with uncertainty. Let conversations end without resolution. Resolution is comforting. Discomfort is instructive. People reveal themselves when they're unsure. What they can't read, they can't defeat. This restraint changes how you're treated. People test you less, push you less, interrupt you less, because they don't know where the line is. That's power. You have a choice. Make yourself easy to understand, or make yourself hard to predict. One feels polite, the other keeps you free. Predictability is vulnerability. Restraint protects you from emotional traps, from manipulation, from wasted effort. It keeps your energy intact. That's the key. This chapter is about survival at a high level. Not survival of the body, survival of position. Position determines outcome. Those who reveal less last longer. Controlled men appear dangerous because they are unreadable. You've learned to stop reacting, to slow down, to stay silent, to wait, to let others self-destruct, to not respond, to sharpen instinct, to act only when inevitable. Now you've learned why restraint multiplies all of it. But restraint alone isn't the end. There's one final refinement. Distance. Because the strongest position is not just unreadable, it's untouchable. You've mastered restraint. Now you master separation.
You have a choice. Attach emotionally or observe clearly. Most people confuse attachment with care. They confuse emotional closeness with strength. They think if they feel more, they'll decide better. They're wrong. Attachment clouds judgment. That's the key. The more emotionally involved you are, the less clearly you see. The more you need an outcome, the weaker your position becomes. Neediness distorts perception. Distance clarifies power dynamics. I observe, I don't absorb. That phrase is discipline in motion. When you absorb emotion, it controls you. When you observe emotion, you control the situation. Authority begins with separation. You have a choice. Feel everything that happens around you, or remain centered while it happens. It's not about coldness, it's about clarity. It's not about apathy, it's about discipline. Attachment clouds judgment. Think about decisions you regret. They weren't made calmly. They were made when you were attached to approval, to outcome, to emotion. Attachment creates urgency. Urgency creates mistakes. That's the key. Distance slows emotion. Slowed emotion reveals truth. You don't need their permission to step back emotionally. You don't need their permission to stop caring so much. You don't need their permission to prioritize clarity over comfort. Most people get pulled into emotional storms that aren't theirs. Other people's anger, other people's anxiety, other people's expectations. And they drown trying to save everyone. I observe, I don't absorb. That's the rule. When someone is emotional, they're not dangerous, they're predictable. Emotion narrows perspective. Distance widens it. Distance clarifies power dynamics. When you step back emotionally, you see who's chasing, who's pressuring, who's manipulating, who's weak. Attachment blinds you to this. That's the key. Look at negotiations again. The side emotionally attached to winning loses. They concede too early. They overreact to setbacks. The detached side watches, adjusts, wins. You have a choice.
care deeply and lose leverage, or care selectively and keep control. Selective care is strength. You don't need their permission to detach emotionally from outcomes. Here's the discipline. When something triggers emotion, don't suppress it. Create space from it. Name it. This is anger. This is fear. This is excitement. Naming creates space. Space restores authority. That's the key. Most people are their emotions. You learn to have them. That difference is everything. I observe, I don't absorb. When you stop absorbing emotion, you stop being pulled into reactions. You stop defending. You stop chasing closure. You stop needing validation. And people feel it. They sense distance. Distance is unsettling to those who seek control. Distance clarifies power dynamics. When you're emotionally distant, you see leverage points, where pressure is coming from, where it's weakest. Emotion blinds, distance reveals. You have a choice. Merge emotionally with every situation, or stand apart and see the whole board. Chess players don't panic. They don't attach to pieces. They sacrifice when necessary. That's authority. It's not about cruelty. It's about perspective. Attachment clouds judgment. Think about relationships, work, conflict. The person who cares more usually loses power. They explain more. They compromise more. They wait anxiously. The person who remains emotionally steady sets the terms. That's the key. This doesn't mean you don't care. It means you don't cling. Clinging is weakness disguised as loyalty. Distance is loyalty to truth. You don't need their permission to let go of emotional hooks. Here's another discipline. When faced with emotional pressure, slow your internal response. Breathe deeper. Relax your body. Your body anchors your mind. If your body is calm, emotion can't hijack you. I observe. I don't absorb. Practice this in small moments, when criticized, when praised, when pressured. Praise can hook you just as much as criticism. Attachment to praise creates fear of loss. Distance protects you from both. That's the key. Authority is emotional neutrality under pressure, not indifference, neutrality. Neutral people are trusted. They're steady. They're predictable in values, not reactions. Distance clarifies power dynamics. When you step back, others step forward, sometimes too far. They reveal desperation, overcommitment, hidden agendas. You see it all because you're not inside the storm. You don't need their permission to step out of emotional chaos. Most people think leadership is empathy first. It's not. Leadership is clarity first. Empathy without clarity is chaos. Attachment clouds judgment. It restores it. You have a choice. Be emotionally involved in every outcome, or be strategically engaged when it matters. Strategic engagement preserves energy. Preserved energy preserves authority. That's the key. As you build emotional distance, something else happens. You stop taking things personally. You stop reacting to tone. You stop chasing explanations. You become difficult to manipulate, because manipulation requires emotional hooks, and you removed them. I observe. I don't absorb. This chapter is about maturity, not age, position. Emotionally distant people aren't cold, they're stable. Stability attracts trust. Trust creates authority. You've learned restraint. You've learned silence. You've learned waiting. You've learned precision. Now you've learned distance, and distance changes how you act. Because when you're no longer emotionally entangled, effort drops. You stop forcing. You choose leverage instead. You mastered emotional distance. Now it's time to master efficiency. Because the final evolution of power is this: less effort, more impact.
You have a choice. Work harder or work smarter. Most people glorify effort. They celebrate exhaustion. They equate struggle with progress. That mindset keeps them trapped. Most effort is wasted energy. That's the truth. Impact doesn't come from force. Impact comes from timing. I choose leverage over labor. That's the key. Effort feels noble. Leverage feels dangerous. Because leverage removes the illusion that suffering is required. Most people work harder because they don't know where to apply force. They push everywhere. They chase everything. They drain themselves. That's the flaw. It's not about dedication, it's about discipline. Discipline chooses where not to apply effort. You have a choice. Push harder or position better. Position multiplies effort. Force just spends it. I choose leverage over labor. Look at how amateurs work. Long hours. Constant motion. Minimal results. Look at how professionals operate. Few moves. Precise timing. Maximum effect. That's the key. Leverage is doing one thing that makes 10 other things irrelevant. Effort is doing 10 things that should have been eliminated. Most people don't need more energy. They need better targets. You don't need their permission to stop overworking. You don't need their permission to rest strategically. You don't need their permission to aim higher instead of harder. Impact comes from timing, not force. Think about confrontation again. 10 arguments won't change a stubborn person. One well-timed silence will. Think about career moves. Years of grinding won't beat one correct pivot. One aligned decision can collapse years of struggle. That's leverage. I choose leverage over labor. Here's a discipline you must adopt. Before putting effort into anything, ask, if this succeeds, what else becomes unnecessary? That's the key. If the answer is nothing, it's not leverage. If the answer is everything, proceed. Most effort feels productive but changes nothing. It just keeps you busy. Busy is not powerful. You have a choice. Stay busy or become effective. Effectiveness is uncomfortable because it requires saying no, cutting things, disappointing people. But power demands sacrifice. Most effort is wasted energy. Why? Because people apply effort to symptoms, not causes. They fix surface problems. They avoid root decisions. Root decisions are scary. They collapse structures. That's leverage. I choose leverage over labor. Here's another truth. Hard work without leverage creates burnout. Leverage without hard work creates stagnation. The balance is simple. Work hard, but rarely. Rare effort, massive impact. That's the key. When you act only at leverage points, effort feels light because resistance is low, because alignment is high. That's why timing matters. Impact comes from timing, not force. You don't need their permission to slow down your output. You don't need their permission to increase your standards. You don't need their permission to demand more from each action. Here's how to practice this. Eliminate low-impact tasks aggressively. If something doesn't move your position forward, remove it. If it doesn't create leverage, decline it. Say no more than you say yes. That's discipline. I choose leverage over labor. Notice how your energy changes when you stop wasting it. You're sharper, more focused, less reactive. Because you're no longer exhausted. Exhaustion makes people desperate. Desperate people lose leverage. That's the key. Most people think power comes from output. It doesn't. Power comes from selectivity. Selectivity is hard because it forces you to admit most of what you're doing doesn't matter. That's uncomfortable.
but it's freeing. Most effort is wasted energy. Here's a hard truth. If you need to work constantly to maintain position, you don't have leverage. You have dependency. Leverage creates breathing room. Breathing room creates clarity. Clarity creates better decisions. I choose leverage over labor. This chapter is about efficiency of life. Not doing more, doing what matters. When you stop glorifying effort, you stop glorifying struggle. When you stop glorifying struggle, you start valuing strategy. Strategy beats stamina. Impact comes from timing, not force. You've learned restraint. You've learned patience. You've learned silence. You've learned distance. You've learned precision. Now you've learned efficiency. And efficiency changes identity. You no longer see yourself as a worker. You see yourself as an operator. Operators don't grind. They position. That's the key. But there is one final transformation. Because once you stop chasing, pushing, and forcing, something else happens. Gravity. People come to you. Opportunities align around you. Because stillness creates pull. You've mastered leverage. Now you become the anchor.
You have a choice. Chase what you want, or become what others move toward. Most people chase. They pursue attention. They pursue approval. They pursue outcomes. And in chasing, they give up control. Chasers are controlled. Anchors are obeyed. That's the key. Chasing reveals need. Need invites manipulation. Manipulation drains power. Stillness creates gravity. I don't pursue, I attract. That sentence is the final discipline. The man who doesn't chase is not lazy. He's positioned. Position beats pursuit. Most people believe if they don't chase, they'll be left behind. They fear stillness. They fear silence. They fear losing momentum. But momentum without direction is drift. Anchors don't drift. You have a choice. Run after everything that moves, or stand still and let the right things come to you. Stillness creates gravity. Gravity doesn't beg, it pulls. That's the key. When you stop chasing, something uncomfortable happens at first. Silence, space, uncertainty. Your old habits scream, your ego panics. Let it. This is withdrawal from dependency. You don't need their permission to stop chasing validation. You don't need their permission to stop chasing responses. You don't need their permission to stop chasing outcomes. Chasing is not ambition. Chasing is insecurity in motion. It's not about desire. It's about discipline. I don't pursue. I attract. Look at how people respond to desperation. They step back. They delay. They exploit. Look at how people respond to grounded stillness. They lean in. They wait. They adjust. That's gravity. Chasers negotiate from weakness. Anchors set terms. Chasers explain. Anchors decide. Chasers react. Anchors remain. That's the key. Stillness creates gravity because it signals abundance. If you're not chasing, you must have options. If you're not rushing, you must be confident. If you're not seeking approval, you must be secure. People respect security. You have a choice. Fill silence with effort, or let silence do the work. Silence filters reality. Only serious things cross distance. Everything else fades. That's leverage. I don't pursue, I attract. Here's the discipline you must adopt now. Stop initiating unnecessarily. Stop following up repeatedly. Stop pushing conversations that don't move naturally. Let space do its job. Space reveals interest. Space reveals intent. Space reveals respect. You don't need their permission to step back. If something is meant to align, it will. If it isn't, chasing won't fix it. Chasers are controlled. Anchors are obeyed. Think about power dynamics again.
The one who wants it more loses leverage. The one who can wait gains it. Waiting is not emptiness. Waiting is confidence expressed quietly. Stillness creates gravity. This applies everywhere. In work, in relationships, in leadership. The man who doesn't chase opportunities builds value, so opportunities chase him. That's the key. Value attracts, need repels. Most people chase because they skipped the work of becoming. Becoming is quiet, it's unannounced, it's invisible, but it compounds. You don't need their permission to focus on becoming instead of chasing. Here's a hard truth. If you disappear and nothing changes, you weren't valued. If you disappear and things destabilize, you were. Distance reveals importance. Chasing hides it. I don't pursue, I attract. Anchors don't demand attention. Their absence creates it. This chapter is not about arrogance. It's about alignment. When you align with discipline, clarity, restraint, and timing, you stop forcing outcomes. Outcomes start responding to you. That's gravity. You have a choice. Live in pursuit or live in position. Position is earned through everything you've learned in this book. Not reacting, slowing down, staying silent, waiting, letting others self-destruct, not responding, sharpening instinct, moving only when inevitable, practicing restraint, creating emotional distance, choosing leverage over labor. All of it leads here. Stillness creates gravity. When you become an anchor, life reorganizes around you. People speak differently. Opportunities approach carefully. Noise fades. You stop being hunted by urgency. Urgency hunts others. That's the key. Anchors don't chase respect. They receive it. They don't chase loyalty. They inspire it. They don't chase control. They embody it. I don't pursue. I attract. This is the final transformation. You no longer move out of fear. You move out of certainty. You no longer seek permission. You act from position. You no longer prove. You allow results to speak. You have a choice. Return to chasing tomorrow, or remain still and let gravity work. If you choose stillness, understand this. Stillness is not the absence of ambition. It is the highest form of it, because ambition without discipline chases. Ambition with discipline attracts. That's the key. Become the man who doesn't chase. Let the world move. You remain. And when you do move, it's final.
You were never meant to fight every battle. You were meant to outwait, outlast, and outthink. While others burn themselves trying to prove, you conserve. While others explain, you observe. While others react, you dominate. Doing nothing is not quitting. Doing nothing is choosing power over panic. From today forward, pause longer than feels comfortable. Speak less than expected. Move only when the outcome is guaranteed. Let the world rush. You stay still and win. Now close this audiobook and practice silence.